When I was a kid, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this, we were really poor and I didn't even know it. Like when I was little, we were poor and I didn't realize it. Because I always had a house to live in, I always had food, I always had clothes, everything I really needed, I had. It wasn't until I got older that my mom talked about my dad being laid off from the factory, and I remember that period of our lives, but I don't remember us being poor. But she said there were times when my grandparents had to bring us groceries because we were that poor. We just didn't have it. And we had a big garden. My grandparents had a big garden. And I think part of that was financial. Seeds are cheap, but groceries are expensive. And so my mom would plant stuff, and she would intentionally grow enough so we'd have vegetables throughout and freeze and can and all that stuff so that we could have food during the year. And then as I got older, I didn't even realize it, but I must have learned that because my parents always were teetering on that, the red and the black, being in the red, being in debt. They always had a car payment. I'm sure they always had credit card bills. And they paid on them, but it kept them constantly in debt. And I did the same thing. I went to college. I'm sure I got a free pizza out of it. I've signed up for my first credit card. I probably got a pizza or a t-shirt out of it. I thought that was a great investment to get a credit card that I used just for emergencies, and I got a free pizza. Well, by the time I graduated undergrad, I had a couple $1,000s of credit card debt, and I was basically only making the minimum payment because I was a poor college kid, right? And so I remember very distinctly humbling myself. When I graduated undergrad, I was going into grad school, and I knew I'd be in there for a couple years. And I remember humbling myself and asking my parents to pay off my credit card bill because I knew that I was going to be poor again for another couple years, and I would only be able to make the minimum payment, and it was just going to grow. And so my parents, God love them, they did. They paid off the couple $1,000s on my credit card. You would think that would have taught me a lesson, but when I graduated grad school in the next 3 years, I had yet another couple $1,000s of credit card debt. And I remember those first few years working, I was working in Gallatin County at the time, and I remember at one point I had, $20-ish in my bank account. I had credit card debt. I was like, what am I going to do? It's Wednesday, and I don't have any money to get groceries. Fortunately, I had enough groceries in the house to eat, and I had enough gas in the tank to get to and from work 2 more days until payday. And my credit card debt would go from $1,000 to $5,000, and I pay it down, and Christmas, I'd ramp it up and put Christmas all on my credit cards, and then come income tax returns, I pay it down, and I'd be like, yes, I'm so close. I played what I called the credit card game, where I'll get this credit card at 0% APR, and I will pay it off. In the 6 months grace period, because I'm not paying any interest, I'm going to pay that thing off. And that did not happen. I refinanced my house. At one point, when I refinanced my house, I rolled all my credit card debt in there, because it's a lower percent APR. This is a great deal. I'm going to save all this money. I didn't think about the fact I was paying closing costs to do all that. I made all the mistakes, all the financial mistakes that there are to make, pretty much I made them which made me a great financial literacy teacher because, Randy, you too?
Did you borrow money?
Huh?
Did you borrow money?
Oh yeah, hold on, I'll get to that part of the story. So when I started going to Crossroads, I met this guy, and I had kind of a crush on him, and he had taken financial literacy class through the Dave Ramsey program, and Crossroads was offering financial peace. And he's taken it again. I was like, oh, he's kind of cute. I'll take it so that I can hang out with him, And it changed my life because it taught me to do things like I had to evaluate my debt. I had over $20,000 in debt, which at the time was half of my yearly salary. And I'm not counting my house. That was in my second mortgage, my credit cards, and my student loans. I don't think I had a car payment at that point. Might have been car payment. I can't remember. No, I wouldn't have been car payment at the time. And I had all this debt. I had maybe $200 in savings. And so part of the class taught us all these things. First things first, they're cut up all your credit cards. Stop using credit. Second thing, we had to evaluate our net worth. We had to sit down and list all of our debts. And that's when I was like, oh. I knew I had them in my head, but I didn't actually write them down. And when I saw how much money I owed, I'm like, how will I ever get out of this hole? I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this hole. Then they're like, yeah, most people take this program in 18 months, they're debt free. And I was like, there's no way. There's no possible way I can do this in 18 months. And they taught us to live on a budget. And I remember, like, I had an idea of how much I spent, but not really. I didn't want to write it down. Because I thought, if I do a budget and I write it down, I'm never going to be able to leave my house. I'm going to eat just ramen noodles, and I'm going to go to work and come home and just sit here all by myself. Because I thought, Dave Ramsey calls it the straitjacket mentality. That a budget's going to be the straitjacket and you're never allowed to do anything. But I did it because it was part of the class. And then in the Dave Ramsey program, they have you do the envelopes. So what you do is you say, okay, I've got $200 at the time. It was like $200. It's crazy to think. At the time, it was $200 a month for groceries. Now I feel like that would get, like, for some of us, that might not even get us through the week. But so I had $200 for groceries, and I had a grocery envelope. And when that grocery envelope was empty, I didn't buy any more groceries. And I had you do that?
Was that for the month?
Yeah, at the time. I mean, this was 18, 15 years ago. And I had fun money, and I put my however much money, fun money, in my fun money envelope. And when that envelope was empty, I didn't go do anything fun anymore. I didn't go out to eat. And if I wanted to shop, if I wanted to go to Target, like now I walk by Target. You know that dollar section in Target? I walk by like this. Because it's so tempting. It's only $1, but you had 12 of them, and now you've just spent $12 on a bunch of junk. So, you know, like, and I had to evaluate my spending. Like, I cut my cable back, and I looked at some of the other costs I had and tried to cut that back. And at first it was hard. There was some discipline. I remember my friends saying, hey, let's go out to dinner. I'm like, I can't. My fun money is empty. My fun money envelope is out of money. So we'll have to go next week. And it was...
I do that.
You do that?
Once a week, I'll splurge, baby.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's like, well, I already did that.
Yep. And now I got to stay home or have my friend come over. Come on over to my house. I'll cook. I got some groceries, you know. So I lived like that. I lived on my budget, and I remember distinctly I remember walking into Fifth Third Bank in Louisville, Kentucky, with a check, and I paid off that first credit card, and boy, did that feel good. And then the Dave Ramsey program says, like, you pay minimum payments on everything but the one. You put all your extra money in the one, and then you roll it over. It's called the snowball. And so after I paid off that first credit card, if I'd been paying $100 on that, I took the $100 from that, and now I added that as the extra to the minimum payment on the next. And I paid off the second credit card. And then I paid off the second mortgage. And I paid off my student loans. When I paid off those student loans, hallelujah. It takes most people 10 years. It took me like 13 years to pay off my student loans because I just wasn't smart. I didn't have a plan for my money. And so I did all that. And Crossroads taught, and Dave Ramsey's program is very biblically based, and I teach it at school, and I have to just kind of dance around the tithing part of it because it's public school. But it brought me so much freedom. Like now that I've learned that discipline, money's not stressful. Back then, money was stressful to me. If I had an expense, like during the program, my hot water heater went kaput. And I had saved up, one of the things they said is to have an emergency fund. I had an emergency fund, and when I need a hot water heater, instead of stressing out and be like, oh man, I'm going to put this on my credit card, I just used my savings account. And I just paid for it. And it was no big deal, and it was not stressful. And it was awesome because I learned when that hot water heater went down, that was my first big expense after having an emergency fund. That's when I learned the freedom that came from my budget. The discipline that I had to do brought freedom in the end because I had the money. And so I was thinking about the series, and I thought, well, what does the Bible say about money? And Jesus talked about budgeting. He talked about that. And it's funny because I'm going to show you the verse. He talks about it like, well, you all know about this. Like he talks about it like, this is a foregone conclusion that you all already know this. So here's the verse. He's talking to his disciples in Luke. And he says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Like, aren't you first going to sit down and estimate how much it's going to cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Because if I laid a foundation and then I can't finish it, everyone who sees it is going to ridicule you, saying, oh, that person began to build and they weren't able to finish. So basically he's saying, you're going to look stupid if you don't manage your money. You know that you should manage your money. You know that you should have a budget. And if you don't, you're going to look foolish. And then when he was talking in this situation, he's using the example of money to talk to them about the commitment to follow him. Because I've told you a story about money, and that is, budgets are awesome, and budgets bring freedom, but that illustration shows us that we can use that same concept, just like Jesus is saying. Let's take the concept of money and apply it to other areas of our life. Because we know in our head, whether we do a budget or not, we know in our head that budgets are good and they're a smart thing to do. But how many of us budget our time? How many of us budget our calories? How many of us budget our energy? Okay, so I know in my head I should have a budget for my money. But anyone who knows me knows that I do not do a good job of budgeting my time and energy. This week was an example. I didn't get home, I wasn't free from the day this week until after the earliest was 9:30. So Sarah asked me last night, she's like, you want to come over? I'm like, I can't. This week kicked my butt because I did not manage my time very well. My calendar needs to go on a budget. Yeah. My energy needs to go on a budget. And I think a lot of us have some area in our life that needs to go on a budget. Whether it's our finances, where are you overspending? Are you overspending your money? Then you need to go on a monetary budget. Are you overspending on your time? Then your calendar needs to go on a budget. Are you overspending in your energy? Are you exhausted all the time because you're constantly outputting and not getting back things that fill you up? Maybe your energy needs to go on a budget. Because I'll do that. I'll be so tired. I saw this meme and I wish I'd saved it. I can't find it. It's what's the blue fish from Finding Nemo? Dory? And she's like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted that I can't imagine, I don't have any extra time. I'm like, ooh, a new project. I've had to teach myself, I want to do this project and I get excited about it, but I don't have time. I'll be like, I should go to Home Depot and buy the stuff for that project. I'm like, Stephanie, you don't have time to do that project. Don't even go to Home Depot. Don't you buy those things because you don't have the time to do that right now. And so we've got to examine what area of our life are we overspending. I feel like each of us probably have at least one area where we are not spending wisely. When we are going in the red, when we're going into debt. And not only do we need to say, where do I need a budget? Budgets are good. Huh? Fast food. For me, it's food. For me right now, too, I need to go on a calorie budget. My pants are all tight right now because I say, oh, I'm going to eat right, but oh, now I'm tired. Oh, but someone brought cookies to work. Someone brought cookies. I've got good friends. I walked in the teacher's lounge this week, and there's a tray of cookies, and they looked really good. And I was like, oh, cookies. And my friend's like, don't eat them. They look good, but they don't taste good. You're trying to eat healthy. Don't even do it. It was great because my friends are managing my budget for me. They're they cost too much in calories. And so a budget is a great way to start. Sometimes we need to start with the try hard tool. For me, if you're overspending your calories, a diet is your try hard tool. It's a framework that will eventually bring freedom. Because if I could do, as I'm writing the sermon, I was like, man, if I would just use the tactics I use for my bank account, for my grocery list, for my eating, for my diet, I would have the same freedom. I think about how much freedom I have in my money. I could have that same freedom with food if I would apply the same tactics that I applied before. And that's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, you understand this concept when it comes to money. Now let's apply it. He's talking about their commitment. Are you going to commit to following me? You gotta make sure you're willing to do all the things. You gotta be willing to do the things that it says because it's a commitment. A diet is a commitment. A budget is a commitment. And so that tool is helpful, but then what I would encourage you to do is once you get that tool up and running, that will start to show you some results. And while you're doing that, I would encourage you to start examining why. Why are you overspending? Why are you overspending your money? Why are you overspending your calories? Why are you overspending your energy? Why are you overcommitting yourself? What is the root? Because this is ironic, there's a poverty in your heart that leads to a poverty of whatever that is. I will give you an example. My cousin grew up poor. They were at least as poor as we were growing up. And when he graduated from college and started living like in the real world, he had a real job and he went crazy. He got a really nice apartment. He got a really nice Jeep with the big tires and the nice clothes. And he was going out and he was partying. He was the cool guy with the cool Jeep and the cool apartment for about a year, until he was the broke guy who couldn't afford to drive his Jeep because it was so expensive. And so he spent years paying off the debt he accumulated in that 1 year. And I wondered to myself, like, why did he do that? Part of it's like, yeah, I'm free, I've got money, but also like, why? Why did he have to have the nice apartment, the nice Jeep, the nice things? And then I remember when we were kids, he was from a small town too, and there were some wealthier people in that town. I remember we would go on vacation, there was a J. Crew outlet, and he would save his money so he could buy all the J. Crew clothing and the Abercrombie clothing. He wanted to wear the name brand clothing to school so his image was good. For him, looking like he's got it together is really important. His first fiance, almost wife, she was hot. And I think he liked having that hot girl on his side. Look at me. I'm so like with it and cool. I've got this hot girl on my side. And she wasn't a good fit. Fortunately, they figured that out before they got married. But for him, I think the motivation is he wants to look like he's got it all together. Like he's cool. Like he is rich. And so that manifested for him in debt. And so my question to you is, this week, if you want to grow spiritually, what you want to do this week is examine in your heart, where are you overspending? In what area of your life are you going over your budget? Get on a budget and do the discipline of getting on a budget. You know, I was on my budget. I still went on vacation. I still went out with my friends. I didn't eat ramen noodles all the time. I mean, I had to cut back on some things, but I was still able to do those things, even though I was on my budget. Budgets bring freedom. And then, once you get the budget up and working, spend some time with God, asking Him why. Like now for me, I'm going to be spending some time with God, asking Him, why do I overeat? My whole life, I have been like, I'm like my mom, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. My whole life I've been that way. Why? Why do I feel the need to overeat? That's what I'm going to be examining in my life, among other things. That's your tool to grow. Is to not just leave here and be like, that was a great message, but to leave here and do something about it. If you want to grow, you're going to leave here and do something about it. And all of God's children said, Amen. All right, if anyone has not